Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up, where we look at the decisions the board makes at its regular meetings. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and joining me as always is County Board Chair Christian Dorsey, and for our last show of the year, joined by board member Katie Crystal. Welcome to both of you.
Good to see you, Kara.
Thanks, Kara. Now, on the board's last meeting of 2019 was a meaty one. We're going to start today with a look at 3 items that give us some insight into what Amazon's planned headquarters means here in Arlington. So let's dive right in. It was quite the action-packed meeting this month. So let's start with the Met Park redevelopment,
Sure.
which is kind of the crux of the whole thing. So let's dive right in and tell us what happened.
Well, you know, in the big picture sense, this is a really transformative project for Arlington. We're going to have, with Amazon's new headquarters, 2 22-story office towers that are going to be the most energy efficient buildings that Arlington has ever produced. They're going to go at the highest level of the certification for sustainability, LEED Platinum. They're going to be doing a combination of on-site energy, and they have a goal of making sure that they're using 100% renewable energy at the site by 2030, which is even more ambitious than our community energy plan. There is about $14 million that's going to go into expanding and outfitting public open space that's also going to be perpetually maintained by Amazon. There's going to be an on-site child care center. There's going to be a community center that's going to be available for both county government as well as county nonprofit and civic group use. There's also going to be a $20 million contribution for affordable housing. That's $12.5 million above the base expected contribution. So there's a lot of great things going on here, not to mention improvements to the street network with protected bike lanes and linear parks. Very much the built environment's going to be a good thing. And then, you know, what I'm excited about, Met Park was planned more recently to be entirely residential. Now, by putting these office uses here, I actually think it's a better land use mix, and it's going to, you know, allow this to be a much more dynamic area in Pentagon City. And it was something that you don't get often in Arlington, where people didn't really have many issues. No concerns about the architecture, and generally, when it comes to the land use part of it, it was a very smooth and dare I say easy public hearing.
Now, what does this mean then, I mean, going on for the whole community vision for Pentagon City and, of course, Crystal City, since Amazon will be in both?
Well, one of the things I think is really exciting about this project is that it represents the realization of a lot of community plans. Of course, being in Pentagon City, it's outside of the Crystal City Sector Plan boundaries. But when you look at the realization of the Metropolitan Park, as Christian talked about, the actual physical park, or the achievement of things like the extensive contribution to our network of protected bike lanes, or even the energy efficiency standards and in fact, net zero goal of this building, that represents the fruition of a lot of different plans in Arlington County. The public spaces master plan, for example, the bike element of our transportation master plan. Certainly this amazing down payment by our public and private sector on the goals of the community energy plan. And so I think what you're really seeing is visions and values that this community has had, that we have codified in elements of our comp plan or planning processes, now being realized with this major private investment.
Let's talk a little bit about the affordable housing contribution. How significant is that $20 million contribution?
It's the biggest contribution we've ever had for affordable housing in Arlington. And, you know, we have, you know, our system of community benefits that we negotiate with developers. There's a base expectation that they are expected to meet, and that would have, in this case, amounted to about $7.5 million. So you do the math, and we're getting more than double what would be expected, which is significant. It is, you know, it's never happened. So, you know, the idea that we have so much coming in the form of resources to provide for affordable housing is incredibly useful. And, you know, better yet, the way it's structured, it will come in tranches as the building is developed, or if we identify an opportunity to commit those to a single project in the vicinity, we can get the $20 million in one lump sum right away. So this gives us a degree of flexibility and opportunity that we've never had before.
And it's worth reminding ourselves every opportunity we get. The way our Affordable Housing Investment Fund works is we tend to see every dollar of that local investment leveraged by about 4 to 1 through federal low-income housing tax credits, other sources from the capital market that nonprofit developers can access. So I think it's fair to say every project is idiosyncratic and has different costs associated with it when you talk about the development of committed affordable housing. But $20 million is on the high end of what the county's share of or contribution to an affordable housing project has been in Arlington County.
Absolutely,
so I think we will be able to see bricks and mortar as the result of this, and more importantly, homes that are affordable to our moderate income or low income neighbors, and that is what is really exciting.
Very exciting. Now, are we talking very specifically in the Pentagon City, Crystal City area for that affordable housing, or could that be spread all throughout Arlington?
Well, there's no sort of boundary requirement for it, but to be consistent with the way we've described our efforts at affordable housing all throughout the recruitment of Amazon has been the 22202 zip code, which includes Crystal City and Pentagon City and adjacent neighborhoods, but also 22204, the Columbia Pike corridor. We have looked at all of those as being areas that are likely to be impacted by growth that's occurring in Pentagon City and Crystal City. So I would imagine that would be the sort of geographic boundary that we would target this investment for, because it only makes sense and it's consistent with what we have, what we have planned for in terms of mitigating displacement issues.
Okay. And now this is described, this is phase 1 of the new headquarters. What can the public expect to see here in the near future?
So we know roughly where it will be, right?
Yeah.
Geographically in the county, rather nearby to this site. But I don't know that we've seen any preliminary thinking about the architecture, for example. But again, in the same way that the benefits in particular realized out of this project represented the fruition of our longstanding community plans and objectives, I think you can expect to see very much the same in future phases. We've planned our work and we're working our plan here in Arlington County in terms of what we're hoping to realize in the 22202 area. And so one thing that I think people can hang their hat on is that the future planning process for future sites are going to emphasize those longstanding plans and community goals as well.
And if Amazon pursues their plans, this accounts for about half of what they are planning if they adhere to the 25,000 employee target trajectory that has been the subject of our conversation. So about 2.1 million square feet here, which leaves roughly about that much for the other site that they've identified. So we can roughly presume that we're about halfway there in terms of what Amazon is planning in Arlington.
Okay. Well, speaking of housing, as we were a minute ago, a board approved another mixed-use redevelopment in the same area with Crystal House. This is a big project, so let's give our viewers a little bit of a kind of the lowdown on this project.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. This project, or excuse me, this site is pretty massive by Arlington County standards. It's 17 acres. And this has historically been developed under, I think what planners would describe as the towers in the park model. The sort of form of development we saw a lot of a few decades ago. And so this project proposes to keep the 2 existing 12-story apartment towers, but add 4 new apartment buildings and 3 rows of townhouses in for a total of 819 housing units. I would say, again, kind of contextualizing this in our plans for Arlington, this is exciting. We're adding more housing units, more opportunities for people to live close to Metro, close to jobs, as we've been talking about. So being able to really develop in ways that are consistent with our goals of adding growth in the places where the infrastructure can support it. What is also exciting, we've talked over and over again about how we can make sure that Amazon's arrival or the arrival of other major office tenants can avoid spiking rent prices. And adding enough supply to keep up with the demand is one of the top ways that we do that. So to see these opportunities for homes coming in Arlington County, those 819 units are generally going to be market rate. They're not committed affordable. But another really exciting element of this proposal is a new model of achieving affordability during the site plan process.
So this is actually, while we were talking in the first piece about an unprecedented level above and beyond the expected contribution. We are realizing that in a different way here, where instead of getting either on-site units or cash, we are having the developer provide a parcel on the site that they had planned for a standalone building, and that's going to be conveyed to the county for nothing. And on that, we can use the full development potential of that parcel for the purposes of affordable housing.
Now, how soon is the county going to take possession of that land?
So I don't know exactly when it falls within the permits and all of that, but as soon as essentially the developer starts their work, that conveyance will occur.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll be starting our planning for how we turn this acreage into actual homes and apartment buildings for low-income neighbors. And what is really exciting, I think, about this model of getting land rather than cash is that we know the cost of acquiring property is one of the biggest barriers to nonprofit housing developers or for-profit housing developers that want to commit their apartments as affordable. They're competing in the open market, and particularly in the hot market of Crystal City. That land is really expensive. So the opportunity to say to a potential partner, whomever that may be, and that's what our county staff will be working on figuring out over the coming months, to be able to say to them, your costs of development are the cost of building and operating the site rather than the incredibly high land acquisition. It's really an exciting opportunity.
We will be interested to see how this goes. And this is a whole, you mentioned this as different types of housing as well. The high-rise apartment type things and some townhomes. So a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different audiences.
And there's an ownership opportunity here. I was really struck the other day, a presentation, I think maybe by one of our economic development folks, about how few townhouses there are in 22202 at all.
Right,
and we
right.
know this is really an exciting product for perhaps young families who are looking to buy their first home in Arlington, for seniors who would like to downsize slightly from a single family house but want to stay in the neighborhood they love. And so this is a great example. We sometimes talk about the forms of housing that are missing, these sort of mid-size or middle density. And so to see this project realize that is an exciting addition to the neighborhood as well.
All right, we'll see what happens there. Now, as we've been talking about the Amazon project and all of the development, we can go back and remember that one of the big reasons the company chose to make Arlington its home is because of its workforce. And the board got a very exciting grant to help develop that workforce.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
So it has been a value of mine, and I know, Ms. Crystal, that any growth and opportunity that comes from massive investment benefit people who have been left behind historically when growth occurs. So that is the focus of our neighbor, the city of Alexandria, and as you know, we've been working together on how to ensure, to the extent that we can, that this growth is inclusive. So we applied and we were successful in our application for a federal grant that will provide $200,000, which will allow us to train and equip 50 individuals in both Arlington and Alexandria combined to actually get the skills and credentialing and training that they would need to participate in this growth economy. And this is just an incredibly important priority for us. We're going to target neighborhoods around Pentagon City and Crystal City so that people in those neighborhoods who are ready to advance their careers and seek these opportunities get the necessary support in terms of training and credentialing. So I'm just thrilled about it. It's sort of a first step into this very targeted workforce development space, but by no means will be the last step, because I'm just excited. When you look at so many job opportunities, it's going to be certainly difficult for Amazon to fill them without this idea of making sure everyone who is seeking those career pathways gets an opportunity.
So there would there be an application process, or would folks already in getting training be identified as being targets for this type of grant? How would this work?
So I think the way the grant is structured, our joint workforce development group, we have an existing one that covers Arlington and Alexandria, will partner with community organizations in those target neighborhoods to identify the individuals who and structure the programs that are most needed to support getting them what they need in order to successfully apply for job opportunities. So it's going to be not just bureaucratic. It's going to be community partnership based, and we're going to look for those existing institutions in those neighborhoods to better target how the programs are designed.
And just kind of be able to keep that tech pipeline
Absolutely.
going for not just Amazon, but for all of the tech companies
anything.
that are.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes, we say we have one of the lowest the lowest unemployment rate in Virginia, which has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation, and that can paper over the fact that we have plenty of people who are working one or even two jobs, who are employed full time, but whose those are not opportunities that are allowing them to keep up with the high cost of living in our area. So workforce development here really is about trying to empower the talent that we have in the community with the credential, with the skills that they need to engage in these life-transforming and much more remunerative job opportunities.
Okay, we'll see where that goes. We've got obviously a lot going on in the Crystal City, Pentagon City area of the county, and we're going to take a short break, and after we'll discuss the decision to allow elder care facilities in more areas of the county, as well as some of those high-impact transportation projects. Stay with us. We're back with County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly discussion with the County Board about key actions the board members take and what those actions mean to you, your family, and our community. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and with me here today are Board Chair Christian Dorsey and Board Member Katie Crystal. We're talking today about the decisions the board made at its December meeting. So let's talk about the board action regarding elder care facilities, and we're going to now be able to have these in more parts of Arlington? How is this
exactly
work?
Right. Yeah. So, 14% of Arlington County's population is over the age of 60. And when you talk about housing forms, a lot of times that population needs housing that is accompanied by some kind of support. There is a whole continuum of what senior care or long-term care can mean. It might mean fully independent living facilities. It might mean nursing homes. It may mean continuing care where people can stay in one place and access a spectrum of support. But you know that we've seen relatively few of these. We have relatively few of these in Arlington County. It's something we hear from a lot, from our older residents or from our residents who maybe have a parent or loved one they'd like to be able to locate in Arlington. We have had, frankly, a lot of barriers to where these facilities could be built. And so the biggest action that we took yesterday was simply legalizing or allowing these types of housing in about 14 different areas throughout the county that already allow multifamily developments, will be able to allow this type of development. So a great example of the first thing we needed to do is just get out of the way of the market supplying that. The next step, of course, will be what role the county plays in making sure that these types of elder care facilities are not only realized throughout Arlington, but that they're serving the full income spectrum of Arlingtonians.
You mentioned that there have been barriers historically. What were some of those barriers? Why were they there in the first place?
Well, why is a good question.
Okay.
Why is a very good question that we were never able to get a satisfactory answer to. But, as Katie was mentioning, we have multifamily development that's allowed in numerous zoning districts in our county. And yet, the senior facilities were only allowed in a small minority of them. And no one can quite go through the zoning history as to why that came to be. And certainly, it doesn't make any sense. Why in the world we would, not allow, multifamily forms that don't have any functions that are deleterious to a neighborhood. Why in the world would this barrier exist? But it was a true barrier, and one that we only found out because of the particular interest of an applicant for pursuing care, only to find out they couldn't do it. So, we don't know what are the untold opportunity costs of not having done this before. But, if the best time to have done it would have been years ago, the second best time is right now. Right. So we're moving forward.
And I think, too, this is, I'd liken this to an effort we made at the other end of the age spectrum when we realized that there were a lot of barriers in our zoning ordinance and code to childcare. And in this case, too, with elder care, what we learned, or how we learned it rather, was by listening to the business owners who wanted to be able to provide this service, or housing in this case in Arlington, and hearing from them. I have a great site, for example, off Lee Highway, where I'd love to do this, but it's not allowed. Much as we learned from childcare providers saying, I found a perfect spot for a daycare, but I couldn't open because of X or Y barriers. So I think it's a great example of how, with these uses, we're really looking to our business community to help educate us about some of the obstacles that can be removed.
Okay. Well, speaking of Lee Highway, thank you for the segue. Another topic we're talking about is some of the transportation improvements, not only along Lee Highway, specifically at the Glebe Road intersection, but at the Ballston Metro. What are some of these improvements?
Yeah, and actually we should even talk a little bit about, our update on what's happening on Columbia Pike, because we have 3 significant projects that are going to take significant time, but that at least when they are concluded will provide some real tangible benefits. So, the Ballston project is to improve the area where we have the bus portion of that transit facility. So new configurations for the bus bays and new shelters. It's a very, very busy way station, people transferring from bus to rail, people just using bus. It's incredibly dynamic, and it needs better facilities, and it needs to be configured differently so that it's safe and efficient. And so we're going to be doing what has been a long desired project to improve all elements of that. It's going to take about 1.5 years, but it shouldn't cause tremendous disruption to the existing flow, but it will be something that people need to navigate around. And also next year, just to preview something that the next chair and we'll talk about, we'll have some changes coming with Metro that are going to cause some Metro shutdowns because of platform work, which are going to make this area even more intensive of a bus corridor. So there will be a lot of coordination required to make sure this all goes well over the next 1.5 years. And then with Lee Highway, there are going to be some changes at Lee and Glebe that are going to add some width in limited places so that we can get turn lanes to accommodate traffic through that intersection. New bus shelters, better intelligent street lights. We need to get that intersection working more efficiently because it is frequently the cause of significant backups, which impede mobility. And then in Columbia Pike, people have been living with a multimodal project that's undergrounding utilities and widening sidewalks and straightening out and better aligning the street grid. It's a multi-year infrastructure investment that will continue for a while longer and is going to get to a phase of disruption that's going to cause some significant changes in the way people move on Columbia Pike. But the takeaway is, at the end of it, if we're able to endure,
when it's done,
significant improvements.
It's all about moving people more efficiently.
That's exactly right, and I think it does bear observing as we take a step back that this is what it looks like to have well-maintained infrastructure, right? That is serving our entire community. I think all 3 of these projects are designed to make our right-of-way or our bus stops or our pedestrian facilities accessible to all, right? Whether those are folks in accessibility devices because of disabilities, or others kind of operating or traversing the site. The pain is real, but I think this is what it looks like to be part of a community that continues to invest and reinvest in its infrastructure, so that everyone, no matter whether they're on bike, or pedestrian, cars, or bus rider, has a safe experience above all.
And it's kind of, I would think, a living, breathing plan because these modes of transportation and how people use them change all the time. So
they do, but I will say one of the things that we're hoping will be the case with these significant improvements are that this is not something that we're going to need to revisit frequently. These are multi-decade long investments, so there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of thought. They require significant resources to complete and a lot of time to execute. But the payoff is, hopefully, when we're done for quite a while and will be future-proofed, if you will, for any changes that are in the foreseeable horizon.
Okay, well, that is going to bring us to the end of this month's and this year's County Board wrap-up. Christian, Katie, thank you both very much for joining us today. And Christian, this is your last meeting as chair. This is your last County Board wrap as chair for the year.
Well, Kara, I have enjoyed having the opportunity to wrap up the board's work with you every month, and you will have great times with the next chair, but I will certainly be less happy next year than I have been this year. So thank you very much.
It's been quite a ride, huh? All right, well, we will be back in January with a new County Board Chair and Vice Chair to talk about the board's priorities in the new year, as well as the actions taken at the January County Board meeting. Happy holidays and have a wonderful new year, everyone.